Hi, it's Kozy here, and welcome to a Genshin Lore video. Today we'll be talking about all there is to know about the Fatui, the organization as a whole, the people in the organization, and what their goal is as a major antagonist in Genshin Impact. Grab a snack, a blanket, and get cozy because now it's time to talk about the lore behind Genshin Impact's main antagonist, the Fatui. Shezhnaya's diplomats, known as the Fatui, are one of the main antagonists in Genshin Impact. You could even say they're the most, or one of the most active in the game, aside from, say, the Abyss Order. The Fatui are mainly composed of simple diplomatic representatives, but they also have a military department, which is run by the 11 Fatui Harbingers, who are executive leaders of the Fatui who have been given absolute authority by the Tsaritsa. So, who is the Tsaritsa? The Tsaritsa is the Archon who rules over the frigid lands of Shezhnaya, a place that is home to perpetual winter storms that could last up to a month. As I just mentioned, the Tsaritsa is the Cryo Archon, which means she has domain over ice and snow. But that also means she is the holder and current owner of one of the 7 seats of power, of course, being Cryo. As an Archon, she is also associated with an ideal as well. Unfortunately, as of now, we don't know what her ideal is, but we can theorize on what it could be based on our current info of what we have. The biggest theory and the most likely is that her ideal is love. There's a multitude of evidence supporting the theory that the Tsaritsa's ideal is love. The first piece of evidence comes from Dainsleif in the Tevat chapter storyline preview, Travail, where he says this about the Cryo Archon.
She is a god with no love left for her people, nor do they have any left for her.
Why is this important? Well, when you consider that in the trailer, all other mentions of the other nations, and more importantly the gods of said nations, all have keywords regarding the ideals and what they are known to be. That being freedom for Barbados, contracts for Morax, eternity for Beelzebub, wisdom for Bure, justice for Focalor, and war for we don't know. We have yet to discover the Pyro Archon's Goetic name, so that's fun. And each of these keywords we know are or are at least associated with one of the 7's ideals. The most obvious and clear word Dainsleif says regarding Shezhnaya is love. Another piece of evidence is said by Wanderer in his About the Tsaritsa voice line. He says,
"Everyone praises her for her kindness and benevolence, but they forget that love is also a form of sin. What if she's just trying to compensate for something?"
This is the second time she is referred to with the word love next to her. These two big pieces of evidence makes it very likely that her ideal is love. While the Cryo Archon is one of the 7 and holds a place on one of the thrones, she doesn't exactly agree with the actions they've done or with the heavenly principles. She's also not the original Cryo Archon. Why or how she inherited the position of Archon is unknown, but we do know that it was shortly before the Cataclysm, an event that deeply troubled her. A quick reminder of what the Cataclysm was for those who don't know or have simply forgotten. It was an event that took place 500 years ago and is also sometimes referred to as the Fall of Khaenri'ah or the Dark Calamity, as well as similar names. The event was incredibly destructive, and for a time, chaos was widespread. The specifics of the event's timelines are still unknown, but some events have key significance in the Cataclysm. Khaenri'ah was known to be a nation without a god, not because their god died or had abandoned them, because it never had a god to begin with. It made many technological advancements, and without a doubt was known as the pride of mankind. Perhaps this is why they chose to work with the Abyss, an unworldly place, also sometimes referred to as the Void Realm, which has the power to devastate both Archons and humans alike. The Abyss began flooding Tevat with creatures they've never seen before, let alone fought. Along with this were Khaenri'ah's forces. The Archons went to Khaenri'ah to fight and destroy their opponent at the source, but this ultimately harshly failed, as they not only lost the battle, but they also lost 2 Archons in the process. This loss forced Celestia to step in, sending the wrath of the heavenly principles to Khaenri'ah, winning the battle, while also destroying it in the process. This wasn't the end, as there was one final punishment towards Khaenri'ah for trying to destroy the imbalance between gods and humans. The heavenly principles placed a curse on those with blood from Khaenri'ah, an unending curse of immortality known as the Curse of Wilderness. The Cataclysm left many in a state of disarray and sorrow, but perhaps the event left the Tsaritsa the most shaken. After witnessing the horrors of the fall of Khaenri'ah, it left her very bitter at the actions Celestia had done. She had become disillusioned towards Celestia and grew resentful towards the divine. As a result, she cut off all ties with the other Archons, even cutting off Barbados, whom she seemed to have a very close relationship with, according to Venti.
500 years ago, I knew her well, but I can't say the same is true now. You see, A certain catastrophe happened 500 years ago, and after that, she cut off all ties with me.
From this point on, she declared that she vowed to rebel against Celestia and the heavenly principles, and win. Eventually, she met a man named Piero, who was once a royal mage of Conria and witnessed the cataclysm. He too had the hatred for the divine for destroying his fellow man. So he sought after the Tsaritsa when he heard of her rebellion. He swore his loyalty to the Cryo Archon, and together they formed the Fatui to take revenge on Celestia. The weapons that are given to elite or above soldiers in the Fatui are known as delusions, which are incredibly powerful. Delusions act in a similar way to visions, which are gifts given to the people who have received the favor of the gods for their ambitions. These visions grant immense strength to those who are granted them, and they allow the vision holders, or elogenes, to harness the specific elements based on their vision type. Delusions work in a similar way to visions, however, they come at a price. Whereas visions are granted to those whom the gods believe their ambitions are strong enough to handle the power of the gift, delusions are given directly by the Tsaritsa, simply as a weapon for combat, not taking into account if the individual's ambitions are strong enough to handle the gift. This results in a variety of factors and side effects, most notably rapid aging, fatigue, and other sicknesses. Unlike a vision, delusions don't rely on the wielder's ambitions, but instead they use their life force and vitality. The most notable examples of this are Diluc's father, Crepus Ragnvender, Chepe, as well as the other Watatsumi soldiers who use delusions in secret, and Childe at the end of both Chapter 1, Act 3, and Chapter 4, Act 5. Interestingly enough, the Chinese and English names for delusions act as a counterpart to the names of visions in each language. In Chinese, visions are called zhenjiyan. Yen? I probably mispronounced that. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Google isn't helping me, so I hope that's okay. But it means eye of God, whereas delusions are called Jiyan, again, forgive my pronunciation, which means evil eye. This being a counterpart to Xin Ziyan. And while the English versions don't have obvious wordplay to their names, if you take a look at them and think of their meanings, you could see what they are. The term vision may make you think of your eye, which is clearly a nod to the Chinese name, but can also be used as what one would say is a experience of the divine or supernatural, whereas a delusion is a strong but false belief that is propagated even in the face of facts to the point that it becomes apathetic or deluded. Throughout the game's story, we encountered the Fatui multiple times. They lie, steal, and use other underhanded tactics to get what they want and to achieve the Tsaritsa's goal to rebel against the heavenly principles. So what exactly is the Cryo Archon's plan? Well, your guess is as good as mine. As I'm writing this, we still have no clue as to what her plan is, but there are some theories as to what she is doing. As we already know, at least if you played the game's story, you do, the Tsaritsa has sent her 11 Fatui Harbingers to each of the nations in Teyvat to get and bring back the gnoses of each of the other 6 archons. If you don't know what a gnosis is, in the simplest terms, it's a proof of status for an archon, and it links and allows the 7 to resonate with Celestia. Status symbols take the shape of chess pieces, and so far we know of 3 of the 7's ranks in a chess game. Barbados is the queen, Morax is the rook, and Beelzebub is the bishop. Currently, the Fatui are in possession of 6 of the 7 gnoses in Teyvat, that being Fintes, who was forcibly taken by Salaxiura in front of the Church of Mondstadt, Zhongli's, who traded it per the conditions of his and the Tsaritsa's contract, A's was given to Scaramouche by Yaimiko to spare the traveler's life, which was then forcibly taken by Nahida, who then used it as leverage to have Dottore destroy all his segments. Nahida then traded her gnosis in exchange for some unknown knowledge from Dottore. And finally, Farina's gnosis was given to Arelcchino as a diplomatic gift for helping with the disaster in Poisson by Neuvillette. Since the Tsaritsa, of course, has her cryognosis, that means the only gnosis left to get is the pyrognosis, which is currently in the possession of the Cryo Archon Murata in Notland. So what are some possible reasons the Cryo Archon could be collecting the other gods' gnoses? Well, one answer is that she's gathering up simply to grow power and awaken the heavenly principles. We do already know that the main reason for a gnosis is to provide a link to Celestia and the Archons. So perhaps if you have enough of them, you can create an even stronger bond than normal. We do already know that the heavenly principles have been silent since the cataclysm 500 years ago. So maybe a strong enough link can somehow stir awake Celestia. Of course, this doesn't come without its faults though, such as why would the Tsaritsa even want to contact the heavenly principles? It could be to locate them, but even then, what for? The second reason could be to restore and return the stolen power to the Seven Sovereigns. And up until Masquerade of the Guilty was released, this was the theory I personally believed the most. So first, who are the Seven Sovereigns? I'm going to keep this one nice and short, as I do want to go into more detail with the Seven Sovereigns in a separate video from the Fatui. But the Seven Sovereigns are the 7 strongest dragons of each of their respective types. These elemental dragons were once the lords of the old world, until their status was ripped away by the primordial one who came from another world and created a new order around Teyvat. This usurping caused the 7 sovereigns to lose some of their power, which would later be used to give the 7 archons power and status. We've only seen 2 of the 7 sovereigns in the story so far, that being Apep, the Dragon of Vinder, or simply the Dendro Dragon, and Neuvillette, who is the reincarnated Hydra Dragon. So why would the Tsaritsa be trying to give the sovereigns back their power? She might think that the elemental dragons with their forces could be enough to overthrow Celestia, and with that, the heavenly principles. Unfortunately to me, this theory really fell apart after the most recent lore drops in 4.2, namely being Neuvillette gaining back his elemental power from Focalors, the Cryo Archon. So what's the issue with this? Well, if Neuvillette is back at full power, that should be good for the Tsaritsa according to this theory. But if that's the case, and all she wants to do is bring back the power to the 7 sovereigns, what purpose does she have to still take the gnoses from Neuvillette? There wouldn't be. So unless there's more to her plan with the gnoses, this theory may be wrong. But if it is right, and there is a piece missing, what could that be? Well, it has to do with the final theory we're going to be talking about. And it also has to do with the biggest lore drop in 4.2's story. That being that the gnoses are made from the remains of the 3rd Descender's corpse. The lore drop about the gnoses being made from the remains of the 3rd Descender has a lot of potential for the story of Genshin Impact. So what does this mean for the Tsaritsa? We've already established that the Tsaritsa could be using the gnosis to accumulate power, whether that's for herself or the 7 sovereigns, or some combination of the two. While we don't know a lot about the 3rd Descender, it's safe to assume that they had strong elemental power, seeing as all the other Descenders we know of also have that. And the twins have very high elemental sensitivity. So it wouldn't be a stretch to say the Tsaritsa wishes to resurrect the 3rd Descender in order to fight against the heavenly principles. This can also work in tandem with the 7 Sovereigns theory, as it would explain why the Tsaritsa still needs the Gnosis even after Neuvillette had his power restored. Maybe she would still need to recover all 7 pieces of the 3rd Descender's body to revive them. Another reason she may want to restore the dragon's powers may be because the 3rd Descender may not be able to be resurrected with the elemental energy imbued with their body, the Gnoses. As I mentioned previously, the 11 Fatui Harbingers are the executive leaders of the Fatui, who have been given supreme authority to rule them. We meet a variety of the Harbingers in-game, and we have yet to see some in-game, so how about we go over each one of the 11 Fatui Harbingers. This is Arelcchino. She's the 4th of the 11 Fatui Harbingers. Like most of the Harbingers, she was first introduced in Teyvat chapter interlude teaser, A Winter Night's Lazo. She runs the House of the Hearth, an orphanage whose children are often brought to join the Fatui after reaching a certain age, some even being dispatched as sleeper agents in different nations until further orders. The children in the House of the Hearth refer to her as Father, a title she gave herself. This is also not the only time she's referred to with masculine titles and terminology, as her Fatui codename, the Knave, means a dishonest or unscrupulous man. Unscrupulous means having or showing no moral principles, not honest or fair. This definition fits her to a T and is further explored in Childe's voice line about her.
Look, I've got nothing against people who have their own agendas. I myself joined the Fatui to get more experience in combat. But I don't like her at all. If she stood to benefit from betraying others, she'd turn against the Tsaritsa in a heartbeat. There isn't a sane bone in her body.
This is also further said and is a common trait of her inspiration, Arelcchino, and Commedia dell'arte. It's also to be noted that she is originally from Fontaine, and we find out through Lenny that she is a stern believer in the prophecy and is working to counteract it, even criticizing Farina, the Cryo Archon, to her face for seemingly doing nothing to prevent it. I left a lot of the Knave out, as I do believe that she'll be the next playable Harbinger to be released, and I wish to delve more into her character when we have more lore to her. The ninth of 11 Fatui Harbingers, Pantalone, also known as the Regrator, was born into poverty. We don't know of his opinions of the gods when he was younger, but we do know he eventually questions why the gods have the domain and control over so many of life's aspects after not being able to receive a vision, which furthered his longing for wealth. He's in charge of Shezhnaya's economic policies, which we find out from Andre, the manager of Northland Bank, and Liwa. He's currently the wealthiest of the Harbingers, and Childe describes him as a guy that has a head filled with grandiose plans fueled by raw ambition, and that he doesn't understand a word about his theories, but he ultimately doesn't care as long as he keeps the Fatui's cash up. What these grandiose plans are, or what his theories are about, we don't know, but in Wanderer's voice line about him, it may have to be related to fair exchange, which he says,
"Oh, the 9th rank guy. He's obsessed with the idea of fair exchange, to the point of wanting to overthrow the natural imbalance between gods and humans. But I guess it's just how ordinary mortals are like. It's easy for them to come up with pointless delusions. Honestly, it's nothing worth writing home about. Just like how there's also nothing impressive about his abilities or choice of partner. Anyone who chooses to work closely with a doctor is sure to meet a nasty end."
With this, we can think that he's working with the Doctor to try to overthrow the imbalance between gods and humans. Also, I'd like to mention his codename Regrator, which means person who regrates or buys up commodities in advance and sells them for a higher price, especially during a crisis, which could be as to how he gained his wealth from nothing. Pulcinella's first appearance was also in Tibet Chapter Interlude Teaser A Winter Night's Laszlo, but his actual on-screen cameo was in Tibet Chapter Storyline Preview, Prevail, where he is a silhouette with his followers, who are referred to as Pulcinella and followers, and the featured characters for Act 6. He's the mayor of a currently unnamed city in Shezhnaya. The city could also possibly be Morpasok, the seaside village Childe is from, as it would explain why Pulcinella was there to witness Childe's adept combat prowess. In Childe's voice line about him, he says that he doesn't know his motivations, but that he genuinely thinks Pulcinella has good intentions, and that he has treated Childe and his family as if they were his own, even taking care and bringing snacks to Tonya and Tusser, which they often write about in their letters. While Wanderer seems to have a very completely different view of him, even calling Childe dense for not seeing through him. He says,
"Only someone as dense as Childe would think the rooster is looking after him and his family out of the goodness of his heart. Although the mayor has indeed done a number of things for their benefit, anyone with a brain would be able to tell that the underlying meaning is, your entire family is in my hands."
While Wanderer is a skeptical person, there may be some truth as to what he says, but we currently don't have enough evidence or background to prove this. His title is the Rooster, as mentioned by Wanderer in his voice line. The codename Rooster could mean a multitude of things, but the more likely answer could be it's a reference to his inspiration in Commedia dell'arte, as well as his role as mayor. Just as a rooster crows at dawn, so too does he give morning announcements, as seen when he calls off half a day's work to mourn La Signora's death. Unfortunately, little to nothing is known about Sandrone. The little we do know is interesting. She's the 7th of the 11 Fatui Harbingers. She was first seen in Tibet Chapter Interlude Teaser, A Winter Night's Laszlo, as well, like many of her fellow Harbingers. She's often engrossed in her work, according to Childe and Wanderer, her work being the study of modifying and building automatons, such as the one she's seen riding in the previously mentioned Interlude Teaser. The automation she's riding appears to be a modified rune guard or some other rune machine. Childe, and more so Wanderer, says that she has a terrible personality, and Childe says anytime he's looked at her, she looked as if she wanted to murder him, and he doesn't know how he could have upset her. And lastly, her codename, the Marionette, seems to be a reference to her inspiration, Sandrone, in Commedia dell'arte, who, along with his wife and son, were represented with puppets. And while it hasn't been confirmed, but it's more likely the case, she's probably the person to have made Catherine, the receptionist for the Adventurers Guild of various locations around Tibet. Capitano is very interesting for a multitude of reasons, but to me, it's the lack of confirmation regarding his rank, as we don't know it. According to Childe's voice line about him, which is,
Seen him in battle before, and oh, what a sight it was. Perhaps I'm ranked too low for him to notice me right now. Well, he may not recognize my strengths yet, but one day, I'll show him what I'm made of.
This seems to imply that he has a higher rank than Childe, but the only other rank that isn't currently filled by someone is number 1. Why is this a problem, you may be asking? Well, if Capitano's the first rank Fatui Harbinger, that would make Piero's director position unranked, which would leave the 10th rank currently unfilled. But ultimately, we do not know his official rank, but we do know how the Fatui see him according to Wanderer's voice line. He says,
The ever-righteous captain, the brave and fearless captain, the nigh invincible captain. Even my mechanical ears demand maintenance after listening to so many compliments from the members of the Fatui. Don't you think that possessing absolute righteousness is actually a latent danger? And that's without taking his great personal strength into account.
as well as being a strong warrior, he's also liked by the members of the Fatui. Victor states that if he had a choice, he would rather work under Capitano in the Tales of Winter Commission. He also seems to have a sense of respect when it comes to when a battle should occur, as both in Mika's voice line as well as during the event, Ballads and Brews, Mika shares when he, along with Varka, encountered Capitano and his subordinates. After Capitano and Varka met, they both agreed to peace, which continued until Capitano left for Notland, where the traveler would more likely meet him. Not much is known about Colombina, but she has to be the most mysterious Harbinger, at least in my opinion, for that exact reason. She's ranked 3rd of the Harbingers, which already tells you that she's a threat, as Nahida says towards the end of the Archon quest, A Toast to Victory.
Top-ranked Fatui Harbingers, up to number 3, possess power comparable to that of gods.
That means Colombina, Dottore, and either Capitano or Piero has similar power to those of a god, which further pushes her mysterious allure she has as well as how threatening she could be. In fact, both Childe and Wanderer tell you to be careful around her in their voice lines. Childe says,
Fatui Harbingers are ranked by strength, and I have no idea why that girl is number 3. I'd test my skills with every Harbinger who ranks above me if I had the chance, but when it comes to her, something just doesn't feel right. Anyway, you should be careful around her.
And Wanderer says,
Let me ask. What should you do if you were to encounter a damsel who is oblivious and innocent at any given time, and unconcerned and unfeeling in any given situation? If it were me, I could at least challenge her to a fight. But if it were you, with your conscience, I would stay away from her.
There's also the fact her headdress mimics a seraph, which further makes her mysterious. She could be connected to a variety of things, but it would take a whole nother set of pages in my script to explain them, so I'll have to come back to her in the future, perhaps in her own video. Number 2 of the 11 Fatui Harbingers, the Doctor, or his real name Zandik, was once a student of the Academia and was admitted there for some time after being chased out of his hometown for being a quote-unquote monster and madman. It's not known exactly what he did or said to be exiled from his hometown, but it could be because of his obsession to create advanced humans, a goal he still today is working towards, as seen when he attempts and almost succeeds with Scaramouche in the game. He has been on many expeditions while attending the Academia. The most notable of them were his trips to the ancient city of Gurabad and one to Ardavali Valley, where he found machines and technology that he believed were created by a civilization not under the control of the Seven. With another expedition to the jungles in Sumeru, his downfall truly starts. He was partnered with a dastard named Sare, and while they were mostly cold to one another, eventually they began having what Sare described in her notes as a quote-unquote good time, and says they are going to have a picnic that night. We don't know exactly how this happened, but while on this picnic, Sare ended up getting mauled by tigers and was killed. Zandik and his team returned to the Academia, where he continued to study, this time on a chronic illness known as Elazar, where he did, in fact, cure one patient, which had never been done before, but he did this by using materials he got from dead patients. During this time, or a little before, the Academia exhumed and did an autopsy on Sare, Zandik's expedition partner, and found that her cause of death wasn't blood loss, which is what they originally thought. They found that her hyoid bone was fractured, which suggests she died of strangulation. The Academia investigators also found that records were missing, and to them, this was enough evidence that they needed to have Zandik expelled from the Academia. After his expulsion, he was approached by Piero, who invited Zandik to join the Fatui as Il Dottore, which Zandik found humorously ironic as it means the doctor. Dottore would continue his research as a Fatui Harbinger, conducting many experiments on mostly young children, one of which being Kale, who suffers from Elazar. We touched a little on Piero before during the history of the Fatui. He's the director of the Fatui and the first member of it. He was responsible for recruiting several of today's Harbingers, such as El Dottore, Scaramouche, and La Signora. He was a royal mage in Conria, which we learned during the interlude quest and version of Genesis, as well as finding out that he lived with the Traveler's sibling for a time. One artifact, the Mocking Mask, has a bit of lore regarding him in its description, which it states, "Since the stain of my compatriot's blood cannot be cleansed, I shall become the jester who laughs in the face of fate. Since my level of learning could not compare with the sages, I failed to earn the favor of the previous ruler. So too did I fail to stop them from tearing away the veil of sin, ushering in a tide of divine wrath, destruction, and foolishness. Then I shall become, instead, a fool, a fatus, and devote myself to Her Majesty, who understands my pain. My name is Piero, the Jester. Please listen to the words I have to say. Proud Fatui comrades, I know your heart harbors both the fire of rage and the cold of eternal winter. Each one of us has borne witness to the absurd callousness of the foundational principles of this world. So, let us don our mask in mockery of the world as we go forth and rewrite the rules of destiny." As the Mocking Mask states, the previous ruler of Conria lacked trust and support towards Piero, and failed to heed his warnings, which caused divine wrath to be brought upon them because they tore the veil of sin. This is definitely referring to the curse of immortality that was placed on the people of Conria. Tartaglia is the 11th of the Fatui Harbingers, and the Harbinger we know the most personally. He grew up in the seaside village known as Morsbach with his siblings, to which he is presumably the middle child. As of now, we don't know his older brothers or his sisters' names, but the three youngest are Tonya, Anthon, and Tusser. He's the youngest of the Harbingers and is often seen as a lone wolf, which irritates the other Harbingers, as well as his ability to find trouble, or should I say, trouble finds him, which often causes unnecessary problems for the Fatui. Despite being so young, he's an adept fighter and he yearns for the heat of combat. A large part of this bloodlust for war can be attributed to an unexpected event in his childhood. When Tartaglia, or his real name Ajax, was 14, he always had a yearning for adventure. So one day he ran from home and hoped for adventure. Shortly after leaving, Ajax tripped and fell into a dark crevice in the ground. He woke up and found he was in the abyss. There, he found a sword woman named Skirk, who trained him how to navigate the abyss. He stayed in the abyss for 3 months before leaving, which during he trained with Skirk a majority of the time. But once he left the abyss, he was shortly found by his mother and sisters, where he found a shocking realization that he, despite being in the abyss for 3 months, had only been there for 3 days in the real world. After this event, Ajax changed. He was more frivolous, confident. He would always end up in fights wherever he went. When his father finally had enough, he sent him to the Fatui. But even this proved to fail, as the 14-year-old Ajax easily took down armed and trained Fatui soldiers. This did, however, get the attention of Pulcinella, 5th of the Fatui Harbingers, who then introduced him into the Fatui, which he swiftly moved up the ranks until he became the 11th Fatui Harbinger, now known as Childe. Tartaglia has many inspirations for his character, the main of which is Tartaglia from Commedia dell'arte, where his role is often flexible in the story, but is usually paired with traits of being farsighted and his stutter. His other inspiration is from the ancient Greek Ajax and his brother Tusser. Before the Fatui, Signora, or her real name, Rosalind Krujlohofter,
Rosaline Krutschka-Lohefalter.
yeah, was an ordinary woman from Mondstadt who went to study at the Academia in Sumeru, which was a big step for her, as she would not only be living behind her nation for a time, but also her lover Rostam, a knight in the Knights of Favonius who was the famed wolf pup. When Rosalind was about to set off on her journey to the Academia, Rostam gifted her a special hydro timepiece so that she could keep track of the amount of time that she would be gone. Unfortunately, as she was studying abroad in Sumeru, a cataclysm broke. She eventually Fatui returned home in hopes her love was still waiting for her. When she got there, she was told of Rostam's death at the hands of monsters. This broke Rosaline. She was distraught with grief, and she pledged that she would cleanse the world's crookedness. And with that, her body melted into liquid fire, and from that day on was known as the Crimson Witch of Flame. She went on a rampage. Flames burned. Even the flames seared her body and face with scars. While the people feared her and her flames, she had only burned monsters and demons like the ones that killed Rostam. Eventually, after some time, her body had almost been completely devoured by her flames when someone found her, the director and founder of the Fatui, Piero. He decided to let her join forces with him. Rosaline, the Crimson Witch of Flame, both were gone. She was given new life from the Fatui. She was given a cryo delusion to soothe her burning flames, and was given the title La Signora. He has gone by many names in the past, and even presently going by new ones. Each name has a significant meaning to who he was at certain moments in his life. The story starts with the Cryo Archon, or A. A needed a puppet that she could leave to watch over and protect Inazuma while she sought after her ideal of eternity. As all creations are, she needed to design a prototype, one that was merely a proof of concept. This puppet prototype wasn't modeled after her in either appearance, intellect, or personality. Eventually, A had gathered enough info through her tests, and she originally planned to simply discard the puppet. But upon seeing her prototype, she realized it had a conscience and its own emotions. She decided to seal his power away and set him free so he could be in charge of his own fate. However, what was supposed to be a kind and benevolent intentions, the puppet would only see this as abandonment and betrayal, from whom he not only saw as his creator, but also his mother. The puppet first stayed in Shake Pavilion for the first few years of its life, before eventually ending up in Tatarasuna when a Mikoshi Nagamasa clan member named Katsuragi found him in the pavilion. As he had no name at the time, and to hide his origins, Katsuragi gave the puppet the name Kabukimono, which means loosely wandering eccentric, and he was taken in by the clan of blacksmiths. Niwa Hisahida, one of the blacksmiths and armory officers in Tatarasuna, was one of the few people Kabukimono grew close with, after Niwa reassured him that he was human, but simply lacked a heart. Unfortunately, this kinship came to an untimely end when Dottore, the second of the Fatui Harbingers, infiltrated Tatarasuna disguised as an engineer from Fontaine and killed Niwa when Kabukimono was seeking aid from the shogun. When he returned unsuccessful in getting the shogun's aid, Dottore lied to Kabukimono, saying Niwa had fled and left the people to him. Kabukimono went to the heart of the Mikage furnace, a furnace used for smithing that had started releasing malevolent energy, killing people, which is why he sought the shogun's aid to begin with. Before he left to the furnace, Dottore gave him a box that he said will protect him. When Kabukimono dispelled the foul from the furnace, Dottore said for him to open the box, and that it was something Niwa had got him. When he opened the box, he found a human heart inside. He was disgusted by this, and Dottore lied, saying it was from one of the subordinates Niwa had killed. He would later consider this the second of his betrayals. The final of his betrayals was done by a young boy who belonged to the Tatarasuna craftsmen. The boy had promised him that he and Kabukimono could live together as a family. Unfortunately, the boy had been infected with an illness that took his life when Kabukimono was out, breaking his promise to Kabukimono. After this, he began living his life as a wanderer in Inazuma for a time, before he was found by Piero, the director of the Fatui, who persuaded him to join the Fatui. He agreed to join, and as a result, he was subjected to many of Dottore's experiments, which also resulted in the sealed power in him being released. After this, he was given the rank position Balladeer and the name Scaramouche. The Fatui, or rather Shezhnaya as a whole, is known for having a fierce and overwhelming military. They have many soldiers, all of whom have been through many days of training. Many of Shezhnaya's recruits were conscripted by the Fatui into the military, which explains why they have the amount of numbers they do. Conscript means to enlist someone compulsionarily, early, typically into an armed service. Compulsionarily means in a way that is required by law. So in the simplest terms, the Fatui are forcing Shezhnayans to fight in the military by law. Fatui soldiers are separated into 3 different ranks that each individual within can move up through. The names of the ranks from lowest to highest are as follows: recruits, sergeants, and lieutenants. There are a total of 12 different types of Fatui soldiers you can fight in-game at the time of writing this, each of which can be categorized into select groups, them being the skirmishers, the Sensen mages, the operatives, and lastly a miscellaneous group which holds the Fatui pyro agent and the mirror maidens. The skirmishers are the basic soldiers the Fatui possessed, and they are armed with weapons that can harness the elements to a certain extent. They work as a group, and what they lack as individuals, they make up in cooperation and elemental synergy. They are well versed in squad-based combat that relies heavily on causing elemental reactions. Being a Shezhnayan soldier has its pros and cons though, as while they have access to large sums of money, resources, and armaments, they also are away in nations far away from friends, family, home, and the like. Alongside that, they have no choice but to rely on people they've never met, though to some, they find comfort with the new allies that will be with them through thick and thin. The death lines after you defeat enemies in Genshin have always intrigued me. Have you ever noticed that the voice lines for some of the skirmishers revolve around food? The Pyro Slinger Bracer and the Cryo Gunner Legionnaires both have combat lines involving food in some way or another. Cryo Gunners say,
"Cooked food. Disgusting."
while the Pyro Slingers say,
"Cook this through."
Considering they are soldiers from afar, they have traveled for a long time, so you can surmise that they don't typically get to enjoy proper food, often eating raw food. As well, in Kokomi's story quest, when raiding a Fatui camp for stolen goods, Paimon makes a comment on how the Fatui's food supply looks spoiled, implying that this is all they were able to eat. So we can make an educated guess that the skirmishers often don't have much to eat, and what they do is often raw, burnt, or spoiled. Sensen mages are seen to be some of the most mysterious among the Fatui, the reasons for which being their lack of info regarding their past and the way they seem to have nowhere to be, simply waiting for someone or something they can play with. The most notable feature of the Sensen mages are, well, the Sensens that follow them and obey their commands, the reasons for which are very interesting. But first, what exactly are Sensens? Sensens are described as, and are, little creatures who can ever so slightly control and manipulate elements. They aren't very strong or powerful on their own, which is why they often are found in groups and can cause significant damage under the right circumstances. Due to this lack of strength individually, they have developed over time a unique method of moving to avoid predators. Sensens also are known to have a fondness for the mistgrass plant, which is described to be rare and wonderful, but is also known to invite both sensens and misfortune. The reason for this is actually because it's their favorite food, which is exactly how the Sensen mages of the Fatui are able to control seemingly endless amounts of Sensens. So why do the Sensen mages use Sensens in battle, if at all? Well, if you actually stop and think about it, the reason seems very clear. Fatui are known to have many soldiers, and a large majority of said soldiers are trained in team combat, and know how to effectively work with many different people. So them using Sensens, a creature known for working in large groups to survive, it starts to make sense as to why they use Sensens, as the Fatui motto is basically safety and strength in numbers. While Sensen mages' most notable feature are using Sensens during battle, that's not their only weapon at their disposal, as they're able to wield specific elements thanks to the power of their delusions. In fact, you can even see their delusions hanging from their necks. The operatives are the newly released enemies in the game, and perhaps the Fatui enemy with the most individual lore among them. They are elite agents who are trained and taught since childhood. Operatives are considered to be the most outstanding soldiers among the Fatui and are known for their extraordinary skill and unswerving loyalty. The work they do varies greatly depending on what roles and missions they receive, which makes them very versatile. As a result, they can work with soldiers like the skirmishers, work alone, or work with so-called tacks. So what's a tack? Well, I'm not entirely sure myself. I've tried seeing if there was some kind of meaning via Google and even Urban Dictionary to find some kind of definition to the word and found nothing. So I had to assume that this is a word only relating to Genshin. Even though the word doesn't have an explicit meaning IRL, we can probably guess what it means, that being sleeper agents. Why sleeper agents? Well, tacks are described to be hidden and scattered around the world, which already on its own sounds like how one would describe sleeper agents. But when you take into account that the Fatui canonically have sleeper agents all across Teyvat, this line of reasoning starts to make sense. In fact, a lot of said agents come from the House of the Hearth in Fontaine, which is the orphanage run by the Knave. The term tax also makes me think of tax, like the object, the ones you would use to pin something up on the wall or you would see on a map, which if you think of them as sleeper agents, it would make sense to call them a tech. Almost as if each agent is just a mark on a map to be used for later. As mentioned earlier, the operatives are incredibly skilled soldiers and even more loyal to the Fatui's cause. They wield delusions in combat, specifically Animo and Cryo, respectively. It's to be said, even if you were to take their delusions away, they would still be fierce and unmatched warriors, especially compared to ordinary humans. In short, the operatives are not a threat to be taken lightly, as they have given their past, present, and future to make sure the Fatui, and by extension the Tsaritsa, achieve their plans. Leniency is something the Fatui is not known for, and that is made blatantly obvious with the existence of the Fatui Pyro Agents. Simply put, these agents are debt collectors, whether it be money, favors, or good trading. They are in charge of effectively carrying out the collections of items in both peaceful and more forceful ways. But settling debts of monetary and material value are not the only debts they take care of. An eye for an eye is the motto these agents take to heart. They sneak among the shadows to stalk and ambush their foes, using and wielding a pyro delusion to give them an extra lethal edge to their blades. And speaking of their weapons, they're actually called sacrificial knives. These knives are created with superior Shezhnayan technology and seem to reflect a disturbingly cold light. It is made from some unknown alloy, which, if you don't know what an alloy is, it's a metal made by combining two or more metallic elements, especially to give greater strength or resistance to corrosion. The weapon is oddly shaped, which has resulted in it being quite difficult to use, and proper training is required to be able to use it to its full extent. While the shape of this weapon may seem impractical, its shape as well as its techniques are designed to exploit a weakness all people have, that being, no one has eyes in the back of their heads. Last but not least are the Mirror Maidens. These women are a part of a special honor guard from Shezhnaya. They use the power of a hydro mirror in combat as well as hydro delusions. These mirrors have the ability to enchant and lure people via illusions that trick unexpected persons into the Mirror Maiden's trap. What these mirrors are or where they came from is unknown, but they are probably made from the prisms dropped by the maidens. There are 3 prisms the Mirror Maiden can drop: the dismal, crystal, and polarizing prisms. These prisms are able to bend light in such a way that allows illusionary images to be made. Polarizing prisms are even able to spread thin light into wider areas when in darkness. The prisms are even considered to have the power to sway the human heart and often attract those whose hearts are oft shrouded in darkness. So it's safe to assume that these prisms are at least involved in the creation of a hydro mirror. And while I do believe they are a part of the mirrors, I don't think they're as powerful as the hydro mirror makes them seem, and that it's actually the Mirror Maiden's hydro delusions that could truly cause the amount of power from these prisms. The Mirror Maidens are described as having a highly dignified posture, as if they are one who worships a god, which is highly evident in the combat voice lines where they say things like,
"This is Her Majesty's gift! This body belongs to ice and snow."
They're even said to be willing to do anything to achieve the grand goals of the Fatui, so much so that they'll go to such lengths to be considered the stark opposite of what the title Maiden is. I hope you guys enjoyed this video because it was a lot of work, honestly, and I haven't really done anything like this before, and this is very new, and there was a lot of road bumps in making the video, so I hope you liked it. And if you did, make sure to like, subscribe with notifications on, that way you can stay updated on all the lore videos I make. And yeah, I hope you had a fun time learning about the lore, and I will see you next time. Bye!